Maddie, thank you so much for having me to your studio today. We have a lot to talk about because you do all kinds of really cool stuff. But let's start at the beginning. When did you fall in love with art?
So I originally thought I was going to go to school for music. So in 2012, I went to college at Western Michigan University with the intention of actually going for music and vocal jazz specifically. And then once I actually got there, I just kind of went through this point of change and was thinking, I'm not sure that this is actually the thing that I want to be doing. And my senior year of high school, I started taking a few drawing classes. So it was kind of late thing, but I've always been I went to Weiser Park Elementary, so the arts and Memorial Park and everything like that. So It was always a part of my life, and I kind of knew that some arts career was going to be in my future.
Now, when you were taking some drawing classes, in high school, did you feel like you were good at it? Were you talented? Did you recognize that?
Yeah, I recognized that there was potential there to grow. So
Okay.
that's I was kind of just messing around in my studio, and especially the first year of college, I was kind of tinkering around and trying to build a portfolio of some things that I thought would be at least good enough to get into the art school there.
Right.
So I was able to put some things together for that, and then got into the art school the first year, and then that was the rest of it.
So you clearly had to be talented because not everybody can just tinker around and come up with a whole portfolio that gets you in to art school. So what did you really focus on in school in terms of your media?
Yeah, so at first I was really interested in mark making and drawing, but that program did not have a drawing specific program, so I was kind of exploring different mediums and trying things out, and I ended up in a intaglio and relief printmaking class. And
Like
I
you
don't
do.
even, yeah, I think about that and I'm like, how did I know what that class was when I saw the name?
Yes.
And I had no prior experience in printmaking, so I had no idea what I was going into. So that's where you're actually etching copper plates and carving wood blocks, or was mostly what that class was about.
Yeah.
And I just fell in love with the process. It's so process oriented, and being able to, the physicality of making these things and going through the steps of taking that plate or whatever that matrix is all the way through and then rolling it up with ink and printing it. I just loved the way that process flowed, and how indirect to carving with a tool can make really interesting marks and things like that. So that's kind of where I started, and then kept exploring different types of printmaking, and then eventually joined that specific department, and then that is what my degree is.
That's fascinating. So at what point did you start dabbling in concrete?
I actually just started working in concrete this summer. So I took a workshop at Aramont School of Crafts in Tennessee, and basically it was an immersive week of just learning from this artist out of California, Jake Weigel, and we just spent the entire week thinking about mold making and how to actually use the material, different types of concrete mixes that you can make. So that's kind of where I was interested in concrete for a really long time, as it is really similar to printmaking in the fact that you're using a mold, which is kind of like a matrix. You're able to create multiples of an object, and that is really the main thing about printmaking that it sets it apart from other mediums, is that you're able to create this repetition of additions of these same pieces over and over again.
Okay, now when did textiles come into the picture? Because those are so cool too.
Yeah, so textiles has also been kind of a newer thing. A lot of where I've been taking my work has to do with the fact that I don't have the supplies to do printmaking in my studio.
Okay.
But it's been a great way to explore new mediums and take my work in different directions. But printmaking presses can run about $15,000. So a lot of those materials and supplies are just not accessible to have in a home studio and things like that. So that's really where I was thinking about how could I take my work in other directions, and what materials can I use. So I'm still kind of dabbling in textiles, but I've been doing some tufting and seeing how that works, and just trying to figure out how to use it more in my practice.
What is the best part about creating? I know that you also write about art, and you worked for ArtLink for a while, and so you are really immersed in other people's art. Mm-hmm. What is it that you love so much about being able to create on your own?
I'm really interested in the process. I think that's the biggest thing, is that it's really, you're working with those materials and you don't necessarily know what the end result is. So I just really love like seeing what I can create with those materials and how I could take an object, like all of these concrete casts are actually from a dollhouse that I purchased, and they were poured into that dollhouse to create those textures that you see.
Yeah.
So just trying to, I don't know, it's just the curiosity of making and what can you make.
So how did that come to be? Did you buy the dollhouse specifically knowing that you were going to do that, or was it something that you had? And
it was super random. So before the workshop that I took over the summer, the instruction was just to bring some small objects that we could try to cast.
you went dollhouse.
Yeah, so I went to the Goodwill and I just kind of walked around for half an hour trying to figure out, because I don't really have anything. I was like, what can I make, and also not knowing how the material is gonna react. It's just kind of like, what can I grab and see what happens, just because I don't really know how this material is gonna react, or what we're gonna be doing, or what type of molds we're gonna be making, or what I can do with it. So I just was there for a while, and I picked up some baskets and some random things, and then finally saw the dollhouse. It was like $2. And then it was just a matter of, once we got to the workshop, you know, working with Jake, our instructor, to figure out, okay, how could I use this? It's probably too thin to actually make a silicone mold of itself and pour concrete in, because concrete is not a very viscous material that's gonna, like metal, go into all those cracks and fill in.
Yeah.
So maybe can we just like fill the holes in some areas of like where the windows are, and see if we can just directly pour that concrete in. For example, there's a piece that has a couple windows, and it's actually the attic of the dollhouse. So there was just 2 windows that I patched up with some plasticine clay and some cardboard, and then after that, it was just a matter of putting a mold release. So I literally spray Pam on the on the inside of it, and then mix concrete, pour it in there, and then that results in that object coming out. So that's really the process for all of these, is just figuring out, but also thinking about, is the mold going to release? Because there's definitely instances where it's getting stuck, even though you put the mold release on, just because there's all those little crevices you got to think about, especially with the fine plastic details in those dollhouses of like little flowers and things like that that are imprinted, which in plastic is super easy to mold, but in concrete gets caught.
So what is the hardest part about creating, whether it's concrete or textile or whatever media you're using?
I think it's just, a lot of it is limitations of space. I think for me right now, like something I don't have in the studio is a sink, which is kind of silly, but that's needing to lug down buckets of water and things like that that seem simple, but those definitely put the halts into the process. And just, I don't know, I think it's just figuring out how to work with new materials. I think that's been the biggest struggle, as well as after I graduated in 2016, trying to figure out what was I gonna make? How was I gonna move forward?
Right.
Because printmaking was my medium, does it have to be my medium? And then how do I, if I am interested in still making prints, how do I do that? Is that in my own studio, or can I learn new practices to help further my work in different ways?
Was that daunting or exciting, the idea of I'm gonna have to go in a different direction, because at this moment at least I don't have a printing press?
Right. Well, I would say for the first year, it was really like, I ended up just not making anything. And I think that was 2 struggles, you know. I was starting a new job and trying to figure out those things. So just other stresses of life taking away from my ability to make. So that was one part of it. And also just figuring out, when your assignment at school is to make every day,
right.
How do you incorporate that into your life and make it a priority?
Yes.
I think those were the main struggles there, of just trying to figure out how to make it, what is my practice? Do I, like, how to go to the studio once a week? Is that how to just integrate it into my life?
Have you gotten into a groove with it?
Yeah, I think that's, changing jobs was a huge part of that, of really being able to focus on my work and have more dedicated time towards it. And then also just making it more of a priority and coming to my studio on a weekly basis now, which seem silly and small, but that's a big part of it, is actually just going to the studio and making, instead of just a lot of the earlier this year even was, okay, I'm thinking about my ideas to make things.
Right.
I'm just gonna go to my studio, and then I would organize or clean over and over again and just be like, okay, just need to pick up tools and make something, instead of just like, I don't know.
That's good to hear, because I feel like we all have some sort of component like that where we want to, but it's easier to think about it a lot
Right.
first. So what is next? Do you have something that you are looking forward to trying, or are you going to stick with concrete for the moment, or what's happening now?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is trying to build on this series that I've been starting on. So I finished a lot of work off of that dollhouse that I made, and I've still got a couple of molds that I'm hoping to finish up, and then I just want to see how I can use concrete in different ways. So can I up the scale without making it extremely heavy, and how can I get this work out there? So I really want to spend some time this year applying to exhibitions, and just thinking about that kind of stuff.
Maddie, your stuff is so cool. I love it, and I am so thrilled that you took the time to sit down with me.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
Arts in Focus on PBS Fort Wayne is funded in part by the Our Foundation and the Community Foundation of Greater Fort Wayne.